If you're selling into the UK public sector, one of the first questions you'll probably ask is, where do I actually find government tenders and contracts? The obvious answer is to search official procurement portals, and that is a good place to start, but it's not the full answer. In this video, I'll explain where to find UK government tenders and contracts, what different types of procurement notices mean, and why relying on tender alerts alone might leave major gaps in your public sector strategy. Let's start with the basics. Public sector procurement activity is usually divided into three main stages. First, there's the pre-procurement stage. This is where a public body may signal that it's planning to buy something in the future, before a formal tender has been released. Under the Procurement Act, there are three main types of pre-procurement notices to know about. First, there's pipeline notices, which show high-value procurement expected over the next 18 months. Next, there are preliminary market engagement notices, which are used when a buyer wants to speak to suppliers before launching a formal procurement. And finally, there's planned procurement notices, which can give suppliers advance warning of an upcoming procurement opportunity. These notices are useful because they give you earlier visibility. Instead of waiting for a tender to appear, you can start preparing, researching the buyer, understanding the requirements, and deciding whether the opportunity is worth pursuing. The second stage is the tender notice itself. This is when a public body formally goes to market and invites suppliers to bid. Tender notices usually include details on the buyer, the contract scope, the estimated value, the deadline, the procurement process, and how to submit a bid. In the UK, many qualifying tenders are published on the government's Find a Tender service. But Find a Tender is not the only place to look. Depending on the buyer, region, sector, and route to market, opportunities may also appear on devolved, local, sector-specific, and framework portals. That is why suppliers often miss opportunities when they only monitor one source. The final stage is the award notice. Award notices are published after a contract has been awarded, so they are not live opportunities in the same sense as tenders, but they are still extremely useful. They can tell you which buyers are active in your market, who they're already working with, how much contracts have been awarded for in the past, which competitors are winning work, and when these contracts might be up for renewal. In other words, award notices help you understand the market, not just react to it. There is also one more source that many suppliers often overlook: invoice data. Invoice data doesn't represent a formal notice like a tender or contract, but it does show you what public bodies are actually spending money on, and which suppliers they are paying. That matters because not every opportunity is clearly published as a tender or award notice. Some spending is easier to spot through invoice-level analysis than standard procurement portals. So, how do you actually go about finding UK government tenders and contracts? There are three main approaches. The first is manual portal monitoring. This is usually free, and it can be a good starting point. You can check Find a Tender, Contracts Finder, Devolve portals, and other buyer-specific platforms. The main weakness is that it takes time. You need to manage multiple searches, check multiple portals, interpret different notice formats, and filter out irrelevant opportunities. The second option is tender tracking software. These paid-for tools bring together notices from different portals and send alerts when relevant opportunities are published. That can save time, but there's one important limitation. Most tender trackers are built from published notices only. They're useful once a buyer goes to market, but weaker at showing what's happened in the past. These tracking tools may not tell you which frameworks a buyer prefers, who the incumbent supplier is, how much the buyer has already spent, or whether a contract is due for renewal soon. The third option is using a public sector market intelligence platform. These advanced tools go beyond just live tender tracking. They combine data from across the procurement cycle, giving you a fuller view of how public sector bodies are actually buying. And that's the key point. Finding tenders is useful, but it is not the same as building a strong public sector pipeline and strategy. By the time a tender is published, the buyer may have already researched the market, spoken to suppliers, and shaped the requirement around it. If you only find out about an opportunity when the tender is published, you may already be too late. The strongest sales teams use tender tracking as part of a wider sales strategy. They monitor live opportunities, but they also track early buying signals, framework activity, buyer spending, incumbent relationships, and contract renewal dates. So, to recap, if you want to find UK government tenders and contracts, start with the official procurement portals like Find a Tender, but don't stop there. Look at pre-procurement notices to spot future demand. Use award notices to understand who's already winning work. Track frameworks to see how buyers are actually purchasing, and analyze spend and invoice data to understand where money is flowing in your market. That's how you move from simply monitoring tenders to identifying the right opportunities earlier, prioritizing best fit bids, and building a stronger public sector sales pipeline. If you want a fuller view of your UK public sector market, Tussell helps suppliers track tenders, awards, frameworks, spend data, and early buying signals all in one place. Head to tussell.com to learn more.